The Brisbane Lions are premiers. Good evening and welcome to Footy Furnace for the final time in 2025. We've got a massive show ahead of us tonight. A couple of Brownlow medalists alongside me, a couple of Norm Smith medalists alongside me, and the Lions are premiers. Welcome to you, Hurdy.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Great to be here. It was a fantastic game, particularly up until third quarter when I thought it could go any way, but the Lions just came over the top, and all credit to the Brisbane Lions and the dynasty they're creating.
Jimmy, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. They were absolutely breathtaking. They were exciting to watch. We had a tight arm wrestle for the first half. There was lots of fumbles, lots of mistakes, as you expect in a grand final. But that forward pack of the Lions, they were kicking them from everywhere, and it was just excitement plus at the G.
So tonight we've got the micro, we've got how the Lions got the job done and where the Cats went wrong. We've also got the macro, what it means for the legacy of Chris Fagan, what it means for Geelong moving forward after this 47-point defeat. Will Ashcroft was the Norm Smith medalist, 32 disposals, Charlie Cameron 4 goals. And they played out of their skins, really, the Lions, in that last sort of 35 minutes of the game. Yeah,
they did, and you just see the way when Lachie Neale came on, the game sort of changed a little bit. It wasn't just because of him, but I think Chris got to go back and just have a look at the way they didn't get the game on their terms, did they? I think when you watch at the game, you just thought Brisbane at any stage were about to go, and Cats got a couple of goals against the run of play. But as we just said before, the legacy that Chris Fagan is setting down is something special.
So Chris Scott spoke about this after the match and their inability to set up the ground.
They, in a real arm wrestle, they just got a couple of goals late. And we didn't quite set the ground up the way we would have liked. That gave them those opportunities.
Yeah, I think what he's referring to there, Tom, is not only did they lose the clearance battle, which we're going to go into, Jimmy, in a long way, but the Lions wanted to own the corridor. And they wanted to come back through the corridor. If you look at Geelong's best games, they seem to +1 at all times. Now, having Tom Stewart not in the game really doesn't help. But we see the way that the Brisbane Lions were able to bring the ball to the middle of the ground. They didn't do it all day like this, but when the game opened up, the middle of the ground opened up, and it just looked more like a Brisbane game than it did a Geelong game. And there's no Geelong spare, Jimmy, and I haven't seen Geelong not have a spare that often. I know you'll talk about it in the stoppage stuff, the way they tried to get their spare by letting a Brisbane player roll up. But Dane Zellcroy is terrific. You cannot let the Brisbane Lions bring the ball to the middle of the ground that quickly, and that's what I think Chris was referring to, is about the way the ground's set up. When they had it in their forward line, they weren't able to set up behind the ball to stop the Brisbane Lions coming through the middle of the ground.
Yeah, quite a number of players have spoke post the game, and the key theme coming out of it was take the ball forward. And I know that sounds oversimplistic, but it is actually a good mindset to have it against the Cats, where you surge the ball forward. You have a look at all that play. The run from behind actually drives you forward, and that didn't allow the Cats to set up behind the footy well, as you're touching on there, Hurdy. You can't get structured, you can't keep the game in front of you, and that's why you had to look at all the Cats' defence. They were scrambling this way, they were scrambling back towards goal.
So that's the Alexis of Blackburn key to the game. How can that be so different from what we saw 3 weeks ago? Like, it was a complete reversal, wasn't it?
Well, I think Brisbane, and I don't want to steal Jimmy's thunder, but what Brisbane did in that game is they started handling backwards, so they're going backwards with the ball. If you go backwards with the ball, it allows the opposition defence to come and press up on you and press up on you. A lot of the Brisbane players after the game talked about just taking the ball forward, just bursting the Geelong bubble, getting the Geelong players turned around, the defenders turned around rather than allowing them to come up. It was a definite ploy, and it's very difficult to beat a team twice in 3 weeks. It's very difficult. Because the team that loses goes away and goes, OK, what do I need to work on? It was very obvious the Brisbane Lions wanted to keep the ball going forward, not going back, which they did in the qualifying final.
Yeah, just fleshing that out a bit further. It was set up from stoppage and contested situation, and it's the high half forward which has become very popular in the game. And you have a look at this here. There's Bailey Smith right of screen. You've got Ashcroft and Bailey, two of the most dangerous players on the ground, because they're able to do this, whether they be the half forward coming up or they're actually the midfielder. So you create the outnumber. But look at that, forward handball, take the game forward. Bailey, again, is the spare in the contest. Of course, Patrick Dangerfield is the forward pushing up, but there's another line behind him. But there's a spare here. Means you can actually take the game forward. But instead of quick kicking it, use the numbers in front of you. And it's important. Cameron's up the top there. You just see his legs. He's the forward who's come up to the front side. That's pulled the Cats defender up, who normally likes to drop off. After half-time, this is a difference the Cats tried to go to, but the damage was starting to be done because the Lions were just winning contests but still taking it forward. This is one of the very few times where the Cats were able to get the game on their terms, which is force the handball backwards, but they outnumbered, and that's how the intercept game. But that was probably only once or twice that the Cats were able to do that to the Lions.
And so if most teams in the comp, if they roll an extra number up to the stoppage, that allows Geelong to get their drop-off and get their spare behind the ball. the fact in the second half, Geelong didn't have a spare behind the ball, I think is what Chris is referring to. They couldn't set the ground up the way they wanted to. So yes, not only was the contest on the Brisbane side, it was a fantastic contest, it was rough, it was tough, it was, you know, hands in, it was a great game to watch from a contest point of view, but Brisbane did so well to get the game structurally on the way they wanted to. And the pressure too, Brisbane's pressure far outweighed Geelong's pressure in the day, and a lot of things come off the back of pressure.
The way they played that high half-forward role, they came up to the forward side for them, or the back side for Geelong, but they didn't live there. So they got involved, so that handball release, whether it's forward going to the boundary or back through the corridor, but then they charged forward, so they evened up the numbers really well. So that Cats player had to come up, and then all the others were caught out of position. So what Geelong, as Hurdy's touching on, is they'd allow it and then they'd drop off. But the fact was he was actually getting dangerous and getting used, so he had to squeeze, which pulled the Cats' defence apart.
And it's one of the roles that people don't... It's one of the most underplayed roles in football, that high forward who rolls up to the stoppage. And you're right, they've got to be able to contest, they've got to compete, get their hands on the ball, be that outnumber player. But as soon as the ball leaves your area, you are first back into the forward line to put pressure on Geelong when they win the ball back. And
it's the most goals ever from stoppage in a grand final. So they absolutely dominated that part of the ground. Harris Andrews is a player that we've talked about a lot this year, and he was so critical yesterday, Hurdy.
Look, you've got to love Harris Andrews and the player he's become. And I heard Matthew Lloyd talk about his legacy and whether he's up there with, you know, Matthew Scarlett, and I think he is. I mean, he's two-time premiership captain. I mean, he's got a part of his career to go, but the way he played this game, not only does he beat his man, but then he drops off. Just the positioning he's got and the strength he's got, and you can see a player who's just growing and growing confidence. He's the player of the final series for mine. I mean, he could have won the Norman Smith. I think it normally goes to a midfielder, racks up possessions, and Will Ashcroft did a great job. But for me, Harris was the player of the final series, and what a great job. Two-time premiership captain, and look at him here, just as he gets that ball over the line, he knows he's won the game. That's a very special moment.
Yeah, he was extraordinary. He seems like the calm head behind the footy, which you need. And Zack Bailey, well, he could have had one of the most extraordinary grand finals that we've ever seen. He was absolutely shelling the goal umpire. 3 goals, 6. One he missed completely. But these were the efforts that probably won't go as noticed as much as some of his other brilliant efforts. He's run down, charging tackles like the rest of the Lions, mids and forwards. But then just his body work and physicality, stands up in the tackle really well, Bailey. He sort of wiggles through it really well, and then he's got that composure to hit targets. But this is a real aggression and appetite for the contest. This is my favourite one. It could have nearly been brilliant. Bang, knocks over O'Connor, stays involved. Watch this for the step. Turns inside out, Bowes, have that candy there. Beautiful kick, and it just gets dropped by Lohmann inside forward 50.
So there's a reason why Essendon want to throw big money at Zack Bailey. There's a reason why I think Adelaide would do it as well, if not this year, then next year when he's a free agent. Like, he can almost write his own cheque. He's that important to the Lions.
Well, I was going to ask you about the trade, where that's up to, because I think that you know, that sort of player Adelaide would absolutely love. They need that small forward that can come up. And not only is he a forward, he comes up to the contest, and when Lachie Neale hasn't been there the last 2 weeks, he's played a significant role in the midfield. So a quality player, and as you said, would he kick 3 goals 6 or 3 goals 7 almost? 3-6. It's 9 shots a goal. Not even you've done that, Jimmy.
It was extraordinary. He's had some great grand finals too, Zack Bailey. Lachie Neale, you mentioned, the humble champion, in nearly every interview said, "Oh, I just played my role." He more than did that. When he came on, he had instant impact on the game. And I think, of course, it actually started to shine out the great work Darcy Fort was doing in the ruck. He was getting clear hands on the footy. And if you're getting clear hands on the footy with Lachie Neale at the feet, good things happen. That was an amazing play down there to Ashcroft, who kicked his goal, but just so clean. He's an ultimate professional, whether he got his body right, but he does all the little things really well, which young players should look at. The amount of work he works on his handballs, his ground balls, understanding where to be at stoppage. He gets every reward for all the effort he puts in.
I ran into his mum and dad at the gym on Friday morning, I think it was, and just where they were staying. And they were just talking about him being a fast healer, and they were certain he was going to play. It was just, what it was great was to see the amount of love and care that parents have. I mean, you look at the player or whatever, but there's still these parents hang off their sons' achievements, as you should. The point you made to me out the back about Lachie Neale just wants to get better. Nick Dacos just wants to get better. Will Ashcroft just wants to get better. Matt Rowell just wants to get better. And the detail they go to get better, if you're an AFL player out there and there's no secret sauce, is there? Just do what these guys do and you'll get better.
Well, Lachie Neale always believed that he was going to be fit to play. Brisbane thought he wouldn't be able to play the entire game because he's only played, one game in 56 days beforehand, which is why they made him a sub. And Chris Fagan spoke about it post-match, and I think Lachie did as well. If it went wrong, it would have gone completely pear-shaped for everyone. It would have been embarrassing. But it worked out to a T. He was the exact injection they needed at that time when the scores were level.
And not only that, I heard Lachie talk this morning about if they were getting flogged early, he was going to insert him early. So if the game was going the wrong way, they'd insert him early. So it shows the, I suppose, the faith that the coach has in the player, and the player and the coach. But what I love about Chris Fagan is the environment you create for your team is more important than anything. Yeah. If you create a great environment where people want to play, they trust you, the tactics are right. That's what's more important. I just love what Chris Fagan has done with that. And he took risks with Lachie Neale, and if you want to be great, you've got to take risks.
Yeah, that's right. And that goal he kicked from 50 will end up being, or it probably already is, an iconic grand final moment for a bloke who ruled himself out for the rest of the season just 3.5 weeks ago. Ty Gallop and Logan Morris, Logan Morris is a two-time premiership player.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable how dominant the Lions were with two young key forwards worth no more than $350,000 or $400,000 between them, Erdy.
Well, we look back to the first grand final they lost against Collingwood 3 years ago with the number of games between Dana and Hipwood, 400. And you would have thought if they lost those two players, they're no chance of winning two premierships. They won with Joe Danaher and Hipwood last year, but this year they had neither of them. 51 games combined between them, 400,000 in salary, and they weren't the best players on the ground, but they played really important roles.
And the fact that Ty Gallop has played 6 games, 4 of them in finals, bodes well for the future, Jimmy, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he's showing us glimpses of what he'll look like as a player. He could pinch hit in the ruck because he's big enough, but contested marking is a strength. He actually started the grand final really well. He had about 4 or 5 touches early, but had a good battle with the Cats' key defenders. And
the qualifying final against Geelong, they had Day and Gallop in the team. Made the decision to drop one of them, probably dropped the right one.
Another good move from Chris Fagan. Speaking of Chris Fagan, so 2 in a row now, and it's incredibly hard in what should be an equalised competition to have a dynasty these days. But they've now got more flags than Geelong and Hawthorn this century, and there's no reason to think why they can't, and we always say this every year, but there's no reason to think why they can't have a prolonged period of success that takes them late into this decade or even longer. I mean, this is their 7th year in a row in finals. It's a rebuild that's been deliberate, and they've got so many players to come back in, Jimmy.
Yeah, they've got experience, they've got quality, they've got class. They had 8 players who played in that premiership yesterday under the age of 22. They'll add another high draftee as well. Got 2 pretty important, one's a ruck, a key position player. Answorth, Berry, Coleman, Duday, Hipwood, McCarthy, Payne. They'd all get games in nearly most sides in the competition.
I'm going to ask you a question without notice, so apologies beforehand. If there's 3 players they can't afford to lose next year for injury, who are they? Because every team gets tipped. Who are they? I would have thought it was Danaher and Hipwood were so important, but that's proved the way.
Harris Andrews.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that'd be one of the first ones. Who we got up forward? Zack Bailey.
Yep.
I think that connecting. Maybe Zorko down across the half-back line.
Yeah, I just think that you've got to make sure that your real core, you keep the majority of them. Don't get injured.
Well, what about Chris Fagan's legacy as a coach? A 2-time premiership coach now, never played the game at the top level. His legacy and his standing in the game is now assured as an all-time great.
Well, I think in 2016, when Justin Lepich's last year, they'd won 7 games across 2 years. He's come in, they missed finals the first 2 years. He didn't play AFL football. He was assistant coach at Melbourne, assistant coach at Hawthorn, come in and been a senior coach here, 7 years in the finals. It's not only the premierships, it's what he's done at that football club to rebuild that football club to be a powerhouse.
And we've got his record there after the first 2 years where he rebuilt them quickly on the run. And from that point, you look at that win-loss record, but it's semi-final, prelim, grand final, runners-up, premiership. Yeah. It's an extraordinary run. We might be, not is there going to be a dynasty, we might be already halfway through it. We don't know.
Great culture beats everything, and he's created a great culture.
That's the Chris Fagan story and the Brisbane Lions story, and it's actually still got a long way to go as well. All right, after the break, we're going to dive into the Cats and the post-mortem there. What's next for Geelong, what's next for Chris Scott, and some key players who might be coming in. Will Ashcroft is the hottest hand of the grand final, thanks to our very good friends at Lexus of Blackburn. 32 disposals and 1 goal yesterday, 30 and 1 last year. Andrew McLeod, Dustin Martin, Will Ashcroft, the only players to go back-to-back Norm Smiths. What an incredible effort for a 21-year-old.
Yeah, and incredible and for a lot of reasons. His ability to run and create the lines is sensational, but I just love his touch, Jimmy. He doesn't fumble under pressure, and he's hard. I mean, look, he's a 21, 22-year-old kid who's hard. He can take the tackles, but when the ball's around his area, he cleans up so efficiently and then kicks some great goals.
Yep, decision-making, the 10 score involvements, and the amount of play and drive they get out of it. We mentioned whether it's the high half forward, he can play inside mid, he can go out to the wing. High footy IQ on the guy.
So last year, he was recovering from an ACL, and he walked into Chris Fagan's office and he said, when I'm fit to play, you can select me in the AFL team, but I'm not playing VFL. I'm not doing that. And Chris Fagan had to wrestle with that. I know he confided in Lee Matthews about it at the time. What do I do? I've got a star player that's essentially saying, no, I'm not playing VFL. And Chris Fagan allowed it. He said, you know what? You're a star. We're going to let you do that. And when we're ready to pick you, we'll pick you. And they did, and it's paid off. But it just shows why it's important to coach different ways for different people.
Yeah, I don't think you can have one size fits all. I mean, people say everyone should be treated equally. I understand there's a set of rules, there's boundaries that everyone has to stay between, but you have to treat people as individuals and coach them that way. And they were well beaten in that qualifying final, and the Ashcroft brothers didn't have great games in that qualifying final. So come back on the major grand final day and do what they've both done as players was sensational.
All right, the Cats. The Cats post-mortem, Jimmy and Hurdy, and it's a difficult one for Geelong supporters this morning. An opportunity gone begging. The scores were even at half-time. In fact, with a couple of minutes to go in the third quarter, I think it was 1 point the difference as well. And the storyline out of the game was always going to be how Brisbane managed to stop Jeremy Cameron and Patrick Dangerfield, and they did so well.
They did really well.
Couldn't have done it any better, these two, Hurdy, or the Brisbane jobs of Starcevich and Darcy Gardner on them. And look, there'll be questions over the injury of Jeremy Cameron, but Gardner had him well in check, and even had him well in check for the final three quarters in the qualifying final. Yeah,
absolutely. And having played poorly in a grand final when we lost in 2001, and as the leaders of the group, it's a very tough pill to swallow. I mean, you look at Dangerfield and Jeremy Cameron, fantastic players, but the Brisbane jobs on those two guys, they just shut them out of the game. They really had no influence, and they've got a long summer, those two, to go away and do the work and come back bigger and better.
Dangerfield's prelim final was unbelievable, but it was always going to be hard to back that up. And they weren't the only two as well. Like, on the whole, there weren't many Cats winners.
I don't think many people expected him to back up and play the exact same sort of game. He was Superman with the cape on, but he was completely shut out of the game. It was the positioning of Starcevich as well, because he kept an eye on those Cats' high half forwards coming through. But Dangerfield had come up to the contest, probably didn't do as many centre bounces.
Well, are you surprised at that? Are you surprised he didn't come up to the centre bounce around the contest as much as he had in the previous week?
Well, I think because they were so committed to their other matchups, with O'Sheen Mullen taking the McCluggage matchup, and then also other ones that they had lined up for the game, it probably forced him out. But at different stages, you might have had to say to somebody else, we need danger around the footy. But we touched on it before. Darcy Fort and Oscar McInerney's work in the ruck. So Mark Blitzars was super as a ruckman against Lloyd Meek. At least was getting his hand or pushing it to an area where Dangerfield could be ballistic and just hit the area. But with Fort and McInerney, they became so hard for the Cats midfielders to actually get a jump on it.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing we've talked about most of the year is the fluidity of positions that the Cats play. Jeremy Cameron coming up to a wing or different spots. Brisbane handled that really well. They didn't matter. It didn't mind where those guys went because they had enough talent on the ground to beat them.
So the broken arm or the fractured arm for Jeremy Cameron proved to be a pivotal time in the game. When he was off the field, Brisbane kicked 3 goals to 20 and Geelong didn't score. And that was the moment. And in hindsight, it changed the course of the day.
It did, but I don't think that was the sole reason why Geelong got beaten.
But look at the scores at the time.
Yeah, the scores at the time. Like, it was an arm wrestle in the first half, but I just felt across the entire ground, Brisbane had the game on their terms. Chris Scott actually acknowledged that. That was a big moment, but as I was mentioning before, he was well blanketed before then. Like, he was having no impact on the game because Darcy Gardner was literally on his shoulder the whole entire game.
It's interesting that when Jack Martin came on, and when Jack didn't really have an influence on the game, it's very hard to come in the last quarter as a sub. Maybe they should have, in hindsight, brought him on half through the third quarter just to bring him on early, get some more speed around the ball to change the look. I know the scores were level, but what Brisbane did with their sub, I think it worked better than what Geelong did.
It's part of the reason Chris Scott said in the post-match as well that he hopes the sub is gone, and I think we expect it to be gone because it became a situation where they had to bite the bullet with Jeremy Cameron, and if they didn't bite the bullet, then when would Jack Martin come into the game? Like, it was a tactical move they didn't expect before the match.
But Brisbane lost Starcevich. They were down to 3 on the bench.
But that concussion's pretty clear-cut, though, isn't it?
No, what I'm saying is that if you had have subbed someone out just to get Martin on, and then Cameron couldn't go on, they would have been in the same position as Brisbane.
It's true. Anyway, we hope the sub is dead for the final time. It's had a couple of different iterations. Bailey Smith chirping Harris Andrews. There was no way Bailey Smith was getting through the day without some sort of storyline around him. And he did some good things, but he also probably didn't have his best day, and he would admit that as well. This is just part of the byplay of footy, isn't it, Jimmy?
Yeah, just the fact that the cameras, there's going to be extra cameras zoomed in on Bailey Smith, and that's who he is. But Harris Andrews, he's a big boy. He gave as much as Bailey Smith gave, and he had the last laugh.
Yeah, just a game of footy. Didn't say anything wrong.
No, that's right. No. And Bailey Smith did a nice Instagram post last night where he congratulated the Brisbane Lions. Chris Scott's legacy, he's still an all-time great coach. He's done an amazing job with the Cats, but he will look back, I'm sure, on this opportunity and go, maybe we let this one slip a bit, especially given they'd won so convincingly 3 weeks earlier. Yeah,
no doubt. I think particularly where the game was with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter, you look at the game and you go, well, we could have won. But if you go down and look at the talent on the field now, in hindsight after the game, and it's easy in hindsight, the Brisbane Lions had a higher group of talented players on the ground, and I think Geelong have done a great job with the system, the structure, the way they've played to get to the grand final and almost beat the Lions. But in hindsight, Brisbane were a better team.
What do they need, Jimmy?
We've put up there another mid-half back. You could say a ruck, but Chris Scott doesn't believe in like number one rucks, if you will. He sort of does it by committee with Mark Blitzars and Reece Stanley. I know you're coming against the Lions. Not every side is the Lions, but unfortunately, Jai Clark hasn't played a lot of his football as a small defender. So he's either going to spend the summer with the backline group or he goes back up to the midfield. You add in Tom Stewart, but it feels like they need another mid-size half-back type there, because if you're going to play against the Lions and these sort of sides, you need another one to cover off and provide some drive, and another mid just to round out their midfield group. Of course, if you're going to run with so many taggers, it's Holmes, and then Bailey Smith, and Atkins does a lot of grunt work, but who would be the next one after that?
And it looked like when Cameron and Dangerfield were sort of blanketed, where are they going to get goals from, who are they going to score? And Charlie Curnow would probably help a lot in that forward line, wouldn't he?
Charlie Curnow would help a lot, and we'll talk about him a bit later. They'll get James Warple as a free agent, which might satisfy some of that in and under grunt. Talk to us about the mental wounds of losing a grand final by 47 points. Does it exist or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think it exists into next year, but when we lost in 2001, it hurts. It really hurts. Because the grand final is not just about that year. It's about your whole career and what you've built up and the camaraderie you built with your team and the expectation. And when you lose, most of the people in the losing team don't perform to the level of their ability. So not only have you lost, but you haven't actually performed on the big stage.
And it's how you react to it. First, you've got to acknowledge it's a missed opportunity because they're so difficult to get to. Just assuming we'll come back again next year, it doesn't always happen that way. Injuries, form, and a bit of luck, it can go against you. But it's how you react to it. You've got to sit there, you've got to take your lessons, take your licks, and work out, well, what did we actually really do well? What is a clear room for improvement? And then go about your business and just be absolutely determined to come back as a better player. Because if you're a better player and everyone else is a better player, it'll keep your club in good stead.
So after 2008 and after 2001, when did you review the game and how deeply did you go into it?
I don't remember. We didn't review that well back then. It's a different era, but we didn't get the chance to play another one. So I think you probably you did after you lost the grand final, but we actually didn't. And that was, in your career you go, wow, that was the last time we actually got there. So that was disappointing.
We reviewed it pretty quickly, but it was when you came back day one pre-season. What did Hawthorn do really well to us? What did they take away? Even playing guys who were underdone. I'm not taking anything away from Hawthorn. They were the best side. But, that's when we started to rotate players through who, might have been carrying a bit of niggle, get the timing a bit better. Let's take the ball forward a bit more by foot instead of lots of handball, which Hawthorn took off us on that day.
Are you confident the Cats can rebound next year? Do you think they're still very much in the premiership window?
No, absolutely. Yeah, they've got the system, the structure. They seem to be getting good players come in. There's no doubt they'll be up and about.
They had 11 players who didn't play in their previous grand final, so they've actually turned over their list pretty quickly, and a lot of those are young guys. And the good thing is they've got their key posts looked after. Neale's still young. You look at O'Sullivan, De Koning as key backs, and Jezza could go for another few years as well.
And O'Connor played a good game as well.
He did. He did. Mark O'Connor played really well on Cam Rayner. Cam Rayner still had an impact. Some of those bruising tackles off the back of the square, but you couldn't have asked much more out of Mark O'Connor. He was right on the shoulder of Cam Rayner, who we all highlight is the type of guy in 5 minutes of football can take the game away from you. And his attention to detail, and the two Irish boys and the Irish guys that come into our game, they're amazingly physical athletes. They can run, they're strong, they've got great agility, and they're so determined and very good when you give them a task.
All right, trade news after the break. Well, from the grand final to the trade period, it's a pretty busy time of the year, and I think this trade period, Hurdy and Jimmy, will be the busiest we've ever seen for a couple of reasons. One, there's a lot of big-name players that are wanting to move. Two, that there's more levers to pull from clubs. They can now trade draft picks, not just for 2026, but also 2027. So where do you want to start?
Lots of those names will probably get done because of some of the factors you highlighted. The fresh one today, Judd McVee.
Yeah, Cal Toomey, who's going to join us on the trade show on Wednesday night, broke this story that Judd McVee is seeking a trade home to Fremantle. I think the Demons were quite confident they were going to keep him, but clearly he wants to get home to WA. What's he worth in a trade? I'm not sure. I mean, Fremantle have picks 11, 29, then some later picks, plus 26 and 27. It'll get done. It's just about what Melbourne want in return. And because he's out of contract, the Demons don't have many legs to stand on.
Halfway through the year, Jamara Ugle-Hagan, I would have thought no one was going to go near him. I've heard you talk in the week that you think there's 16 clubs interested in him. Is that still the case?
No, the opposite. 16 clubs not interested in him.
Right, OK.
Yeah, so really the only club that's looking at him is the Gold Coast Suns.
Right.
And that's still very much a big if. Look, they're planning to meet with him as long as they can tick some boxes on the way through. Damien Hardwick's a big fan, clearly, of his talent, but there's some other issues at play that they need to weigh up as well. It's the risk v reward. You know, does the reward of Jamara playing well outweigh the potential risk of bringing him into your environment?
And does it just get done for nothing? I mean,
it'll be a fourth-round pick.
And they'll take his salary, is it?
Well, the salary's a really interesting one. That's something they'll need to work out.
I'm going to talk about Essendon, so we don't need to ask Hurdy anything. a change at the top, Andrew Welsh.
Yeah.
Does it actually impact what Zach Merrick does?
What are your thoughts, Hurdy? No, I think I don't think it changes the thoughts from the Merritt camp at all. I mean, he still wants to get to Hawthorn, and Essendon supporters will be frustrated hearing that. But the truth is, he still wants to get to Hawthorn. It's just about how they go and get it done now.
We had Andrew on the show on Tuesday night, and then I heard him the next day on the radio, and he was adamant Zach's going nowhere. Is that a ploy to get what they want for him, or you legitimately think that they're just not going to...
Only Andrew Welsh knows that, but I still wouldn't be surprised if it gets done.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not saying it will, because Essendon hold all the cards, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Hawthorn and Essendon start talking and they get a deal done. The big date here is Thursday night. Zach Merritt will attend the Essendon Best and Fairest. He'll probably win it.
When he's sixth.
What does he say in his speech? How does he handle that situation? And then once the Best and Fairest is done, all bets are off, so we'll see.
Well, the way he handled the Brownlow, I thought, was excellent. The way he was
exceptional.
pretty honest.
I agree.
The way he did.
The Cats will be hunting 3 of those names on the list. James Worpel, Rowan Marshall, and could Charlie Curnow land down there?
Look, I'm no list manager myself, clearly. You guys would know more than me. But I just can't see how Charlie Curnow gets to Geelong with the draft picks they have and what they can offer up to Carlton. Worpel will get there as a free agent. I mean, again, Hawthorn's Best and Fairest is in the next few days. So I think he gets through that. And then once you get through that, then you can probably tell the Hawks that you want to leave as a free agent.
I can't imagine a world where Jamie Elliott leaves Collingwood. I mean, he's been such a superstar player for them. He's loved by the supporters. I think he genuinely loves the supporters back. The connection's incredible. Is there any chance of that happening?
So how this played out last week is Gold Coast finally offered a 3-year deal for Jamie Elliott, which, I mean, he's a great player, but it's remarkable to offer someone of that age with that injury history a 3-year deal. But the Suns want him. It's exactly what they're after, a small forward.
And what sort of price would it be?
I'm taking a calculated guess, maybe $600,000 a year on average.
What did Collingwood offer, 2 years?
They offered 2 years at less than that, and then I think they realised that there's a genuine chance that Elliott might go, so they upped that offer. They offered a trigger for a 3rd season, the opportunity of development coaching and other things in the 3rd year as well, maybe even move the money around. So, look, I'm not going to say Gold Coast are confident with this. They're not. They're hopeful. But it's still a chance at the moment.
I would have thought if they get somewhere near for 2 years, in his long term, over the whole of his journey of his life, it's better to stay at Collingwood. You just know how those clubs look and the supporters look after people if they stay and they're one-club players.
And I expect the Christian Petrarca discussion to ramp up this week as well. I'm looking at Gold Coast there, especially if they miss out on Elliott and also Adelaide.
So clubs outside Melbourne, a genuine chance?
Genuine chance, yeah. So last year it was Carlton, Collingwood, where he was looking at, specifically more Collingwood. This year, it's... you know, he's winded his gaze to non-Victorian clubs, which I think increases the likelihood that he goes. And as I've said for the last few weeks, Melbourne is more open to it now than they were last year. I mean, last year was no. This year it's, well, you've got to give us something pretty good, but we're happy to talk about it. So anyway, those are the trade shows, October 1, 8 and 15th. Jimmy, you with us, Hurdy, and the man who broke the biggest story in footy this year, Cal Toomey, the Nasiah Wanganeen Miller re-signing, will join us on the end of the panel. I'm looking forward to those shows, Jimmy and Hurdy.